Love, for me, was never something I chased. It was one of those things I believed would happen when the time was right, if it happened at all. I was the kind of guy who kept his head down, worked hard, and didn't waste energy on wishful thinking. But that all changed when I met Lily. I remember the first time I saw her like it was yesterday. It was 3 years ago at a small coffee shop near the office where I worked. She was sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone with a slight frown on her face. I don't know what compelled me to say something to her that day. I'd never been the type to approach strangers. But before I knew it, I was standing by her table. You know, coffee usually works better if you drink it, not just stare at it. She looked up, startled at first, then laughed. That laugh, it was like hearing the sun break through a cloudy sky. "Oh, is that the secret?" she replied, raising an eyebrow. From that moment, it was like we were on the same wavelength. We started talking, and I found out she worked at a marketing firm downtown. She had just moved to the city and was still settling in, which explained the slightly frazzled look she'd had when I first spotted her. I learned that she loved photography, hated mushrooms, and had a soft spot for old black and white movies. By the time I walked out of that coffee shop, I had her number and a goofy grin on my face. Fast forward 3 years, and we were inseparable. Lily had this way of making the world feel lighter, like everything would be okay as long as she was around. She wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my best friend, my partner in crime, and the one person who truly understood me. So, when I decided to propose, I pulled out all the stops. It wasn't anything extravagant. I knew Lily would hate that. Instead, I took her back to that same coffee shop where we first met. I had the barista write, "Will you marry me?" on her coffee cup, and when she saw it, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. That moment was everything I had ever dreamed of. We spent the next few months floating on a cloud, caught up in the excitement of planning our wedding. Lily was in her element. She loved organizing every little detail, from the flowers to the table settings. I didn't mind letting her take the lead. I knew how much this meant to her. My role was mostly to nod, agree, and remind her to take breaks when she started stressing out. But there was one thing I couldn't help but notice. Lily had started spending a lot of time with her bridesmaids, particularly Rachel. Rachel was her oldest friend, someone she'd known since college, and I had no reason to be suspicious. Still, there was something about the way Lily's phone seemed to light up with texts more often than usual, or how she'd excuse herself to take certain calls in private. "Just wedding stuff," she'd say with a shrug when I asked about it. "Rachel's helping me coordinate everything." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But a tiny voice in the back of my mind kept nagging at me. Then came the bachelorette party. It was Lily's idea to go to Austin for the weekend. She and her bridesmaids had planned the whole thing, and I didn't see any reason to object. "You'll have fun," I told her the night before she left. We were sitting on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. "I know," she replied, her voice soft. "But I'm going to miss you." I kissed the top of her head. "It's just a weekend. And besides, I'll be here when you get back." She smiled at that, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. The next morning, I drove her to the airport. She was buzzing with excitement, chatting about all the things they had planned, dinners, sightseeing, maybe even some live music. "Don't have too much fun without me," I joked as she grabbed her bags. "Never," she said, giving me one last kiss before heading through security. The first day she was gone, everything seemed normal. She sent me a few texts throughout the day, pictures of the group at a restaurant, a shot of the city skyline at sunset. That night, we talked on the phone for a bit before she went to bed. By Saturday, though, something felt off. Her texts were shorter, less frequent. When I called that evening, she didn't pick up. "Hey, sorry, we're out and it's super loud," she texted back an hour later. "I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Love you." I tried to brush it off. She was with her friends, having a good time. It wasn't fair for me to expect her to check in constantly. But the uneasy feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Sunday rolled around, and things got even weirder. I didn't hear from her all day. No texts, no calls, nothing. By the time evening came, I was pacing around the apartment, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Finally, around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, hoping it was Lily, but it wasn't. It was Rachel. "Luke," she said, her voice low. "I don't know how to say this, but there's something you need to know about Lily. My heart stopped. What is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She did something this weekend. Something she shouldn't have. Rachel, what do you mean? What are you talking about? My voice was firm, but my heart was racing. I couldn't breathe. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Rachel take a deep breath, like she was struggling to find the right words. I don't want to be the one to tell you this, Luke, she said finally. But I think you deserve to know. Know what? I demanded, gripping my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Lily, she kissed someone this weekend. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right. Kiss someone? That couldn't be true. Not Lily. Not my Lily. Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. Yes, Rachel said quietly. I saw it happen. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't speak. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she was telling me. This had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. Lily wouldn't do something like that. Who? I asked finally. Who did she kiss? Rachel hesitated. I don't know his name. Some guy she met at a bar. It was late, and we were all drinking, she trailed off, as if that excused it. I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. And you didn't think to stop her? I tried, Rachel said defensively. I pulled her aside and told her it was a bad idea, but she didn't listen. She said it was harmless, just a stupid drunken mistake. A stupid drunken mistake. The words echoed in my head like a broken record. After that, I don't remember much of the conversation. Rachel kept talking, but her voice was a distant hum in the background. My thoughts were spinning out of control, jumping from disbelief to anger to hurt and back again. By the time I hung up, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. I wanted to call Lily right then and there, to demand an explanation. But what was I supposed to say? Rachel told me you kissed someone? Did you? That felt pathetic. Instead, I stayed up all night, replaying every interaction we'd had over the past few weeks. I thought about the way she'd been glued to her phone, the private calls, the trip to Austin. Had there been other signs I'd missed? Was this just the tip of the iceberg? When Lily came home the next afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, waiting. She walked through the door with her suitcase, a big smile on her face. Hey you, she said, dropping her bags and coming over to hug me. I stiffened as her arms wrapped around me, and she pulled back, frowning. What's wrong? She asked, tilting her head. Nothing, I said quickly, forcing a smile. Did you have fun? She hesitated, like she could sense something was off. Yeah, it was great. We had so much fun. I'll tell you all about it later. I'm starving. Did you eat yet? I watched her head to the kitchen, moving around like everything was normal, like nothing had happened. I told myself to let it go, to wait for the right moment to bring it up. But the words were already at the tip of my tongue. Lily, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She froze and turned to look at me. What is it? I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Did anything happen this weekend? Her expression didn't change, but I noticed the way her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. What do you mean? She asked, her voice careful. I mean, did anything happen that I should know about? She laughed nervously. No, of course not. Why would you even ask that? For a moment, I believed her. She sounded so convincing, so sure of herself. But then I thought about Rachel's voice on the phone, the way she'd sounded so certain. I talked to Rachel, I said finally. Lily's face went pale. Oh, she said quietly. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. So, it's true, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You kissed someone. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. It didn't mean anything, Luke. I was drunk, and it was stupid, and I'm so sorry. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that it was just a meaningless mistake, something we could move past. But a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something she wasn't telling me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I knew you'd react like this, she said, her voice breaking. It was one stupid moment, and it didn't mean anything. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I snapped. You did anyway. I didn't know what else to say. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. Lily spent the rest of the evening trying to convince me that it was nothing, that it would never happen again. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore it. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder, if she could hide this from me, what else was she capable of? The days after Lily's confession were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. I wanted to move past it. I really did. She swore up and down that it was just a kiss, just a drunken, meaningless mistake. She promised it would never happen again, and part of me wanted to believe her. But another part of me, the part that couldn't forget the look on her face when I confronted her, knew there was more to the story. It was the little things that started to eat away at me. The way she avoided eye contact when I asked about the trip. The way her phone was always face down on the counter now, or tucked away in her purse. The way she'd suddenly get quiet when I walked into the room while she was texting. One night, about a week after she got back from Austin, I couldn't take it anymore. She was in the shower, and her phone was sitting on the nightstand, unguarded. I knew it was wrong. I knew it would only make things worse if I didn't find anything. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away, and I needed answers. My hands were shaking as I unlocked her phone. She didn't bother with a passcode, which somehow made me feel even worse, like I was crossing a line she hadn't even tried to set. The first thing I did was open her messages. I scrolled through the usual conversations, her sister, her coworkers, our group chat with some mutual friends. Nothing seemed out of place. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd been wrong, that maybe she really was telling the truth. But then I opened a thread labeled M. At first, it didn't seem like much, just a string of casual messages. M. Great meeting you this weekend. Hope you made it back okay. Lily. You too. Thanks for everything. Smiley face. Hi, anytime. Your trouble. You know that. Lily. Face with tears of joy, don't tell on me. The messages weren't incriminating on their own, but something about the tone made my skin crawl. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding harder with every word. M. Wish I could have had more time with you. Lily. Me too, but it was fun while it lasted. 2 hearts. That was when I stopped breathing. My fingers hovered over the screen as I stared at that stupid little heart emoji, trying to process what I was seeing. Fun while it lasted. The room felt like it was spinning, but I couldn't stop. I kept scrolling, searching for the one message that would confirm what I already knew in my gut. It didn't take long to find it. M. I can't stop thinking about you. Lily. You have to. It's complicated. M. Doesn't feel complicated to me. Lily. It is. I'm married. Please don't make this harder. I dropped the phone like it burned me. My head was pounding, and my chest felt like it was being crushed. Married. She was married. That was her excuse, her reason for ending it. Not because she loved me, not because it was wrong, but because it was complicated. Lily came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, wrapped in a towel and humming to herself. When she saw me sitting on the bed, holding her phone, she froze. What are you doing? She asked, her voice sharp. I held up the phone, my hand trembling. Who's M? Her face went pale, and I saw it the moment she realized she was caught. Luke, I can explain. Don't. I snapped, cutting her off. Don't lie to me. Just tell me the truth for once. She stared at me, her eyes wide and brimming with tears. For a moment, I thought she might actually come clean, that she might finally tell me everything. But instead, she sank down onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. It was a mistake, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to happen. What wasn't supposed to happen? I demanded. The kiss? Or more than that? She didn't answer, and that was all I needed to know. How long? I asked, my voice cracking. How long have you been lying to me? It was just that weekend, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I swear, Luke, it didn't mean anything. I was drunk, and I wasn't thinking. Stop, I said, my voice louder than I intended. Just stop. I saw the messages, Lily. I know it wasn't just a kiss. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I love you, Luke. Please, you have to believe me. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I got up and left the room, needing to put some distance between us before I said something I couldn't take back. I could still hear her crying as I closed the door behind me. The rest of that night passed in a blur. I couldn't stay in the same house as her, not after what I'd just discovered. I grabbed my keys, slammed the door behind me, and drove aimlessly for hours. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a need to be anywhere but there. The messages played on a loop in my head, every word cutting deeper than the last. Fun while it lasted. It's complicated. It didn't just hurt. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about our relationship. All the moments I cherished, the memories I held onto, now they felt tainted, like I'd been living in a lie. Eventually, I ended up at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. It was mostly empty, save for a couple of truckers nursing cups of coffee in a booth. I ordered black coffee and stared at it for what felt like hours, my mind racing in circles. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go back to her, not until I figured out where I stood. But I also couldn't keep running away from this. The problem wasn't going to solve itself while I sipped coffee in a diner at 2 a.m. By the time I got back home, the sun was starting to rise. The house was quiet, and for a brief moment, I thought she might have left. But when I walked into the living room, there she was, curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her, her face swollen and puffy from crying. "Luke," she said softly, sitting up as I stepped inside. "You came back." I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to figure out how the woman I married could have done this to me. "I didn't come back for you," I said finally, my voice cold. "I came back because this is my house. I don't know what the hell you're doing here." She flinched at my words, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the messages, the lies, and the guilt was gone as quickly as it came. "Luke, please," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk about this." I shook my head. "No, Lily. You need to talk about this. I need answers. The truth this time." She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell you everything." I sat down across from her, my arms crossed over my chest. "Start from the beginning," I said. "Who is he?" "His name is Marcus," she said, her voice barely audible. "He works for one of our clients. We met during the Austin trip." And I pressed. "What happened?" She hesitated, wringing her hands together. We started talking at the conference," she said. "It was innocent at first, I swear. Just small talk during the breaks, nothing more. But then, on the second night, there was this networking event." Her voice trailed off, and I could see the shame in her eyes. "Keep going," I said, my tone sharp. "I was drinking," she continued. "A lot more than I should have. And Marcus, he was being so charming, so attentive. I don't know, Luke. I felt flattered, I guess. Like I mattered." I let out a bitter laugh. "Flattered? Is that all it takes for you to betray me? A couple of compliments and a few drinks?" She winced at my words, but didn't argue. "It wasn't like that," she said softly. "I wasn't thinking. I let things get out of hand, and before I knew it, we kissed." I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. "Don't lie to me, Lily. I saw the messages. It wasn't just a kiss." She looked away, her shoulders shaking as fresh tears fell. "It wasn't," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After the party, we went back to his hotel room." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in around me. "How far did it go?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "All the way," she said, her voice breaking. "We slept together." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. She'd lied to me, over and over again, and now the truth was finally out. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why would you do this to me?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I was drunk, I was lonely, I wasn't thinking. It was a mistake, Luke. A horrible, stupid mistake. And I hate myself for it. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't just a mistake, Lily," I said, my voice cold. "You made a choice. You chose him over me." She started sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I felt numb, like a part of me had died. "I think you should leave," I said finally, standing up. "Luke, please," she begged. "We can work through this. I love you. I don't want to lose you." But her words felt hollow, like they didn't mean anything anymore. You already lost me, I said, my voice flat. The moment you chose him, you lost me. The days that followed were the hardest I'd ever faced. It felt like I was living in a fog, moving through the motions, but never fully there. I kept telling myself it was over, but the weight of the betrayal was suffocating. My life had been split into two versions, the one where Lily and I were happy, and the one where she destroyed everything. Each version felt like it belonged to someone else. I moved into the spare bedroom. We didn't speak much, aside from the occasional exchange about the logistics of the house or the paperwork I was slowly starting to sort through. But there was nothing left to say. The trust had been shattered, and I couldn't bring myself to pretend it hadn't. One night, about a week after everything came to light, Lily came to me. She looked tired, like the weight of her guilt was breaking her. Her eyes were red, but she hadn't been crying. She stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure, as if waiting for permission to enter. I've been thinking, she began softly. I want to fix this. I want us to fix this, Luke. I'll do anything. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. You mean everything to me. I didn't know how to respond. The words I'm sorry felt so empty coming from her. They didn't undo what she'd done. They didn't make me feel less broken. But I could see the desperation in her eyes. She was still trying to salvage what was left of us, even though I knew it was too late. I don't know if you understand, Lily, I said, my voice quiet but firm. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice that showed me I wasn't enough. It wasn't just some slip-up while you were drunk. You went behind my back, kept lying, kept living like nothing was wrong. You chose him. I saw her flinch, the sting of my words hitting her like a slap. But there was no other way to say it. She had chosen him over me, over us. I'm not sure I can get over this, I continued. I don't know if I'll ever see you the same way again. Every time I look at you now, I think of him, and I think of everything you've taken from me. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But the hurt was too deep. I had loved her, trusted her with everything, and she had thrown that away. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But I want to try. I want to prove to you that I can be the woman you thought I was. Please, Luke, give me a chance. I shook my head. I can't. Not after everything. There was a long silence between us. She stood there for a while, as if hoping I would change my mind, but I knew I wouldn't. The decision had already been made. The damage was done, and no apology could undo it. Finally, she turned and left, her footsteps heavy as she walked away. I didn't follow her, didn't try to stop her. It was over. The weeks that followed were a blur. Lily stayed in the house for a while longer, but we barely spoke. I couldn't look at her without seeing everything that had gone wrong. Every conversation felt like an act, a performance we were both pretending to play. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew one thing. I needed to move on. I needed to rebuild my life. It wasn't going to be easy, but I couldn't stay trapped in the past. One afternoon, I found myself at the local park, sitting on a bench, watching the families go by. I was still trying to make sense of everything, still unsure of what the future held. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. There was a flicker of hope in me, a glimmer that maybe, just maybe, I could find peace again. It was then that I received a message from Mike. He had been a friend of mine for years, someone who'd always had my back. I hadn't told him about what had happened yet, but he'd noticed the change in me. He sent a simple text, "You good?" I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back, "I will be." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I wasn't okay yet, but I was going to be. I had to be. The divorce papers came a few months later. It wasn't something I had ever imagined doing, but it felt like the only option. We sat across from each other in the lawyer's office, and though there was no shouting, no drama, the silence between us was heavier than any argument could have been. It was the silence of everything left unsaid. When I walked out of the office, the weight was still there. But this time, it wasn't crushing me. I was starting to heal, little by little. I didn't hate Lily. I didn't even think about her much anymore. She had her own life to live now, and I had mine. And in the end, that's all we could do. Life went on. Slowly, the pieces of me that had been broken started to come back together. There were good days and bad days. Days when I questioned everything and days when I felt like I was moving forward. But I wasn't the same person I was before. And though it wasn't the life I had planned, it was the life I had now. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.